What keeps you sane when you're completely alone behind enemy lines for 48 hours? When every sound could be the North Vietnamese closing in to kill you? When your only companion is a rifle that was already old when your grandfather carried it in World War I? When survival depends on not firing a shot because each report would reveal your position to hundreds of enemy soldiers searching for you? And what does it mean to trust a weapon so completely that it becomes more than equipment? Becomes a lifeline and a companion and the only thing standing between you and death in the Vietnamese jungle? I'm 73 years old, and in June 1968, I was a 24-year-old Marine sniper who spent 2 days and 2 nights isolated in hostile territory with nothing but a Springfield M1903 rifle, 20 rounds of ammunition, and the knowledge that one mistake would be my last. This is the story of those 48 hours, of discovering what you're capable of when there's no backup coming, and no one to rely on except yourself, of learning that sometimes the oldest technology and the simplest tools are exactly what you need to survive the impossible. My name is Daniel Robert Patterson, and I was a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, assigned to Scout Sniper Platoon, 3rd Battalion, 26th Marines, operating in I Corps in northern South Vietnam. I'd been a competitive shooter before the war, had qualified expert with every weapon the Marines issued, and had volunteered for sniper training because I believed I could contribute more as a precision shooter than as a regular infantryman. After completing sniper school at Camp Pendleton, I'd been issued the standard Marine sniper rifle of the Vietnam era, the M40, a modified Remington 700 and 7.62mm NATO with a Redfield 3-9x scope, a modern weapon designed specifically for military sniping. But I'd also been issued as a backup and for specific situations, something far older, a Springfield M1903A4 sniper rifle, a bolt-action rifle chambered in .30-06 Springfield that had been the standard American sniper rifle in World War II and Korea. The M1903 was obsolete by 1968 standards, had been replaced by more modern designs, but Marines being Marines, we kept them in inventory and occasionally issued them to snipers who appreciated their particular characteristics. The M1903 was heavy, over 9 pounds with the scope, had a 5-round internal magazine that required manual loading, used a bolt action that was slower to operate than semi-automatic designs, but it was also incredibly accurate, built to tolerances that few modern production rifles matched, chambered in a cartridge that had tremendous long-range performance, and it had one characteristic that would save my life. It was utterly reliable, could function in conditions that would disable more complex weapons, could be maintained with minimal tools, and it never, ever failed when you needed it. I'd been carrying both rifles on operations, the M40 as my primary and the M1903 as backup, a redundancy that most snipers thought was excessive weight for minimal benefit. But I liked having options, liked knowing I had a weapon I could absolutely trust even if my primary rifle failed, liked the historical connection to snipers who'd carried the Springfield through 2 previous wars. That redundancy, that extra weight I'd been carrying for months would prove to be the difference between life and death in June 1968. Our battalion was conducting operations near the DMZ, the demilitarized zone separating North and South Vietnam, in an area heavily infiltrated by North Vietnamese Army units. My sniper team, consisting of myself and my spotter Corporal James Mitchell from Ohio, was attached to a rifle company conducting a patrol in force through jungle-covered hills that intelligence suggested were used as NVA staging areas. Our mission was standard sniper operations, provide overwatch during movement, engage high-value targets when identified, gather intelligence about enemy dispositions and movements, support the company's tactical operations with precision fire when needed. The patrol made contact with a large NVA force on June 18th mid-afternoon, a meeting engagement that rapidly escalated into a major battle. The company was engaged with what appeared to be at least a battalion-sized enemy element, was taking heavy casualties, was fighting for survival in terrain that gave every advantage to the defenders. Mitchell and I were positioned on a hill about 400 meters from the main engagement, providing overwatch and engaging NVA fighters when we had clear shots. I was using the M40, Mitchell was spotting and calling targets, and we were methodically engaging enemy soldiers, contributing to the company's fight from our elevated position. But the tactical situation deteriorated rapidly. The NVA weren't just defending, they were maneuvering to surround the company. We're bringing up reinforcements. We're executing a coordinated operation to trap and destroy the Marine unit. The company commander ordered a fighting withdrawal, trying to break contact before the encirclement was complete, and our position suddenly went from overwatch to isolated as the Marines withdrew and left us exposed 400 meters from their line. Mitchell called for instructions, was told to fall back immediately, that the company couldn't wait for us and we'd have to catch up on our own. We gathered our equipment, started moving down from our position toward where the company was withdrawing, moving fast but carefully because the hillside was steep and visibility was limited in the dense jungle. We'd covered maybe 200 meters when we ran into an NVA squad moving up the same trail we were moving down. Maybe 8 enemy soldiers who were as surprised to see us as we were to see them. The firefight was brief and desperate, 8 against 2 at close range. Mitchell was hit immediately, took multiple AK-47 rounds to the chest, dead before he hit the ground. I returned fire with my M14 rifle, the weapon I carried for close-range defense. Killed at least 2 NVA soldiers before my rifle jammed, a stoppage I couldn't clear in the seconds I had before the remaining enemy closed in. I grabbed the M1903, the Springfield that I'd been carrying as backup, worked the bolt to chamber a round, and fired point-blank at the closest NVA soldier. The .30-06 round at that range was devastating, dropped him instantly. But I was working the bolt and chambering the next round while the other NVA soldiers were raising their weapons, and I was about to die. Then artillery fire, called in by the withdrawing company to cover their retreat, started falling on the hillside. Shells were impacting all around us, 105mm high explosive rounds creating a barrage that sent the surviving NVA soldiers running for cover and gave me a few seconds to act. I grabbed Mitchell's map and radio, confirmed he was dead, took the ammunition and water from his pack and ran, crashing through jungle while artillery shells exploded around me and NVA soldiers scattered to avoid the barrage. I ran for maybe 10 minutes, putting distance between myself and the contact site, trying to get to where the company had withdrawn. But the artillery barrage had shifted the tactical situation, had broken up formations, had created chaos that made navigation difficult. I checked Mitchell's map, tried to orient myself, realized I'd run in the wrong direction in my panic, had moved deeper into NVA-controlled territory instead of toward friendly lines. I was alone, isolated, at least 2 kilometers behind enemy lines, carrying a bolt-action rifle with minimal ammunition and no way to call for extraction, because the radio had taken a bullet during the firefight and was non-functional. The situation was desperate, probably hopeless, but I forced myself to think rationally, to assess my resources and options. I had the Springfield M1903 with 5 rounds loaded and 15 more rounds in my pack, 20 rounds total. I had Mitchell's pistol, an M1911 with 2 magazines, 15 rounds of .45 ACP. I had water for maybe 2 days if I was careful, food for 1 day, a compass and map, basic survival gear. I had no communication with friendly forces, no way to call for help, no expectation of rescue. My only chance was to evade the NVA forces in the area, navigate back to friendly lines, and survive long enough to make it out. But the terrain was crawling with NVA. I could hear them moving through the jungle, could hear their voices as they searched for survivors from the battle, could hear vehicles on trails that indicated major troop movements. Trying to move during daylight would be suicide. I'd be spotted and killed within minutes. My only option was to hide, to find a position where I could remain concealed until nightfall, then try to move under cover of darkness toward friendly lines. I found a cluster of boulders on the hillside, created by some ancient rockfall, with spaces between them that formed natural caves. I crawled into one of these spaces, a narrow gap maybe 3 feet high and 6 feet deep, barely large enough for me and my equipment, but completely hidden from anyone more than 10 feet away. I settled in, arranged my gear, positioned the Springfield where I could reach it instantly, and prepared to wait out the daylight hours. The first 12 hours were psychological torture, alone in a space barely larger than a coffin, listening to NVA soldiers moving past my position sometimes within meters, knowing that if they found me, I'd have time for maybe 2 or 3 shots before being overwhelmed. I couldn't move, couldn't make noise, could barely breathe deeply for fear the sound would carry. The Springfield lay beside me, 5 rounds in the magazine, safety off, ready to fire if discovered. That rifle became my focus, my anchor to sanity. The one thing I could control in a situation where I had no control over anything else. I thought about Mitchell, about his death and my failure to protect him, about his family who'd receive notification that he'd been killed in action, and who'd never know the details of how he died. I thought about my own family, about my parents and sister back in Oregon, about whether they'd ever know what happened to me if I didn't make it out. I thought about every mistake I'd made, every decision that had led me to this moment, alone and isolated and probably going to die in this Vietnamese jungle. But mostly I thought about survival, about how I was going to get out, about the route I'd take after dark and the dangers I'd face and how I'd use the Springfield if forced to fight. 20 rounds wasn't much, but it was enough if I was disciplined, if I made every shot count, if I used the rifle's precision to engage threats at maximum range before they could close in. The Springfield's bolt action meant slower rate of fire than a semi-automatic, but it also meant the rifle was simpler, more reliable, less likely to malfunction at a critical moment. In my current situation, reliability mattered more than rate of fire. Darkness finally came around 1900 hours, tropical darkness that descended quickly and completely, and I began to move. I couldn't use trails or obvious routes, had to navigate through dense jungle in near total darkness, using compass and occasionally checking the map with a red-filtered flashlight. The movement was agonizingly slow, maybe 100 meters an hour, constantly listening for enemy patrols, constantly freezing at any sound, constantly aware that the NVA controlled this territory and that I was a lone American in the middle of their rear area. I moved for about 4 hours, covered maybe 400 meters, confirmed from terrain features that I was moving in the right direction toward friendly lines, but I was exhausted. Couldn't maintain the level of alertness required for nighttime evasion. Needed to rest before I made a fatal mistake. I found another hiding place, a depression beneath a fallen tree. Concealed myself and settled in for a few hours of sleep, knowing I'd need all my physical and mental resources for the next night's movement. The second day was worse than the first, longer periods of inactivity, more time to think and worry, more NVA patrols moving through the area. At one point, a patrol stopped to rest within 20 meters of my position, 8 soldiers who sat and smoked and talked while I lay frozen, Springfield ready, knowing that if they discovered me, I'd kill as many as possible before dying. They moved on after 15 minutes, never knowing how close they'd come to an American sniper who'd been seconds away from opening fire on them. During that long day, the Springfield became more than just a weapon, became a companion, something I could focus on to maintain my sanity. I checked it constantly, worked the bolt slowly and quietly to confirm function, counted my remaining ammunition, planned how I'd use each round if forced to fight. The rifle's weight was comforting, its solid construction reassuring, the knowledge that it would fire when needed providing psychological security that nothing else could match. I thought about the Springfield's history, about the millions of them that had been manufactured, about the soldiers who'd carried them through World War I and World War II and Korea, about the battles they'd fought and survived. This particular rifle had been manufactured in 1943, had probably been carried by a Marine in the Pacific, had survived 25 years, and was now protecting another Marine a generation later. That continuity, that connection to previous generations of Marines, made me feel less alone, made me feel part of something larger than my individual survival. The second night, I moved again, covered more ground than the first night because I was learning the rhythm of NVA patrol patterns, was learning to anticipate their movements and avoid them. But I was also getting weaker, was dehydrated despite rationing my water, was exhausted from stress and lack of sleep, was approaching the limits of my physical and mental endurance. I knew I had maybe one more night of effective movement in me before I'd collapse, before I'd make mistakes that would get me killed. Around 300 hours on the third day, June 20th, I reached the edge of NVA-controlled territory, could see in the distance the lights of a Marine fire base, could hear American artillery firing support missions. I was maybe a kilometer from safety, but that kilometer was the most dangerous part of my evasion. Crossing the no man's land between enemy and friendly forces, the area where both sides maintained security and shot at anything that moved. I waited until 0500, the darkest part of the night before dawn, and started moving toward the Marine positions. I was moving slowly, stopping frequently to listen, making myself as small and quiet as possible. At about 0530, with false dawn beginning to lighten the eastern sky, I was challenged by a Marine listening post. 2 Marines who'd heard me moving and who called out, "Halt! Identify yourself!" in English. I froze, called back the password for that day's authentication, identified myself as a Marine sniper from 326, explained I'd been isolated for 2 days and was requesting permission to approach. The Marines were skeptical, worried I was an NVA soldier who'd learned English, required me to answer questions that only an American would know. After several minutes of this, they allowed me to approach slowly with my hands visible, confirmed I was American, and brought me into their perimeter. I'd made it, had evaded the NVA for 48 hours, had navigated back to friendly lines through hostile territory, had survived against odds that should have been impossible, and I'd done it with a Springfield M1903, a rifle that was older than I was, that shouldn't have been in Vietnam at all. That had been my only companion and my guarantee of survival through 2 of the longest days of my life. The battalion intelligence section debriefed me extensively, wanted every detail about NVA positions and activities, about what I'd seen and heard during my evasion. The information I provided was valuable, helped battalion understand enemy dispositions and movements, contributed to subsequent operations. But what stayed with me wasn't the intelligence value or the successful evasion. It was the knowledge that I'd survived through a combination of training and will and the absolute reliability of one old rifle that had never let me down. I continued as a sniper for the rest of my tour, finished my deployment in December 1968, came home to Oregon in early 1969. I'd survived 13 months in Vietnam, had dozens of confirmed kills, had completed my mission and earned recognition for my performance. But those 2 days alone, those 48 hours with nothing but a Springfield and my training, remained the defining experience of my tour, the test that proved I could function in the worst conditions imaginable. After the war, I kept in touch with Mitchell's family, visited them annually, told them about their son's courage and professionalism and how he'd died doing his duty. They appreciated knowing the details, appreciated that someone who'd been there cared enough to maintain contact, appreciated that their son's death had meaning beyond the official notification. That annual visit became a ritual, a way of honoring Mitchell and keeping his memory alive and maintaining the connection between us. I also developed a deep appreciation for the Springfield M1903, for what that rifle represented and what it had meant during my evasion. After discharge, I acquired one legally, a 1943 Remington M1903A4, similar to the one I'd carried in Vietnam, and I've maintained it carefully for 53 years. It sits in my gun safe, cleaned and oiled, ready to fire even though I haven't shot it in years. Sometimes I'll take it out, work the bolt, feel the weight and balance. Remember those 2 days when it was the only thing I could trust completely. The question I've pondered for decades is what it was about that particular weapon, about that old bolt-action rifle that made it so perfect for my situation. Modern weapons might have had advantages in rate of fire or magazine capacity or ease of use, but they also had more components that could fail, more complexity that could malfunction, more maintenance requirements that couldn't be met in field conditions. The Springfield was simple, was built to standards that prioritized reliability over everything else, was designed to function regardless of conditions or maintenance. In the situation I faced, those characteristics were exactly what I needed, made the Springfield superior to more modern designs despite its obsolescence in most other contexts. The broader lesson extends beyond weapons to approach life and problem solving. Sometimes the newest and most advanced solution isn't the best solution. Sometimes simple and proven beats complex and cutting edge. Sometimes reliability matters more than capability. The Springfield had been obsolete for 20 years by 1968, had been replaced by weapons that were objectively superior in most measurable ways. But in my specific situation, alone and isolated with no support, that old rifle was perfect, was exactly the tool I needed to survive. I'm 73 years old now, and those 2 days in June 1968 remain as vivid as if they happened yesterday. I can still feel the weight of the Springfield, can still see the jungle through the rifle's scope, can still hear the NVA soldiers moving past my hiding places, can still feel the terror and isolation and desperate determination to survive. Mitchell's death haunts me still. The knowledge that I lived while he died, that I was carrying his equipment when I made it back to friendly lines, that his family's loss enabled my survival. But I also carry pride in what I accomplished, in navigating back to friendly lines through hostile territory, in maintaining operational security and discipline under conditions that would break most people, in proving that training and will can triumph over impossible odds. And I carry gratitude for the Springfield M1903, for the rifle that was my companion and lifeline, for the weapon that never failed when my life depended on it, for the connection to previous generations of Marines who'd trusted that same rifle in their wars. The Springfield isn't just a piece of equipment, isn't just a historical artifact, isn't just a tool that happened to be available when I needed it. It's a symbol of reliability and simplicity, and the wisdom of proven designs. It's a connection to Marines who came before and who carried similar rifles through similar trials. It's a reminder that sometimes old technology has virtues that new technology sacrifices in pursuit of other goals. If this story moved you, if it helped you understand what soldiers endured in Vietnam and what it means to trust your equipment and how sometimes the oldest tools are the best tools, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to hear more stories from Vietnam veterans. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember the Marines who fought alone, who survived through training and will, and the reliability of their weapons. Remember that modern and advanced don't always mean better, that simple and proven have value that complexity can't match. Thank you for listening to this old Marine's memories of 2 days alone in Vietnam, of survival with a Springfield M1903, of discovering what you're capable of when there's no one to rely on except yourself and one old rifle that never let you down.